have some more people coming in, so we'll let them get seated. It's not quite 3, is it? There's no clock in here. It is 3. I'll give it a couple of minutes. But thank you all for coming this afternoon. We're fortunate to have Esia Friedman here to recount to us her memories of growing up in Poland and of her years in hiding from the Germans during the Second World War. There's a lot to learn from Esia's experiences in Europe, as well as from her life when she landed here in Meriden after the war. Per Esia's wishes, I ask that you do not applaud at any time during or after her presentation. And Esia can start speaking whenever she likes. Here you go, my dear.
Good afternoon, friends. My name is Esia Friedman, and I'm a child Holocaust survivor, which tells you a lot about me because I'm Jewish, I survived, and I was under the age of 13. The Germans decided if you were under the age of 13, you were still a child. I am a survivor, and the Holocaust only applies to us. When I hear people going around saying that this was a Holocaust, that's not true. Holocaust is a Greek word that means that we were burned to death, which we've been doing it and experiencing that for the last 2,000 years. So when someone talks about the Holocaust for any other reason than us, then I get very upset because the Holocaust applies only to us Jews. I was born in Poland to a family. My father was Isaac, my mother was Ada, and I had a brother Zeb, and hundreds of relatives. Almost in every village, somebody was related to me, especially all the rabbis. I do want to thank, before I begin, Doreen for inviting me, and I'm very grateful to my son, Rabbi Friedman, who walked me, took all the time off to bring me here. What was it like in Europe? We were persecuted long before the Germans came. We could not go to the same schools. We could not live on the same streets. And yet, when there was a problem, they always came, the Jewish Christian came to the Jewish Pole to be helped. And we grew up to know that everybody should be treated as a human being. I attended a school 6 days a week because the only day we were off was the Sabbath, Saturday. When we walked to school, and that is part of my life, we would walk to school with this lady, and we called her Nana, which means Nana. And I always thought that she was Jewish. She spoke Yiddish because she was German. She would walk with us to protect us to being attacked. That before the war. Well, anyhow, life in Poland for us was difficult because we were not allowed to go to the same job, same schools. And it's a shame because even though when I was a little girl, I would say, why don't they like us? What have we done? We have done nothing. We have given the world everything. You take your polio shot or your fleshlight, or you get Gitalis, or anything else. We have given and shared with the world goodness. And instead we were rewarded with pogroms, which is a Russian word, means anytime they want to kill us, they could, or expulsion. In my own country that I loved, after all, I'm a Polish Jew, in the 30s, the Polish government tried to expel us to Madagascar, which would have been fine. Maybe more of us would have lived. Now, life was difficult because we were not rich people. We were just trying to get along. And how nice it would be if the people just looked upon us, and I've always said, you don't like me till this day. You don't have to, but you don't have to kill me. And that is how I think. I was telling one gentleman that after I was married to an American who grew up in Meriden, born here, grew up there, we went to buy a television for $50. We were both students. And I left a note that said, if we don't come back, you know, they killed us. My husband said, why did you do that? I said, that's life. Anyhow, life went on, and in 1939, you see, my city was Poland. Vilna was Poland. After the Versailles Treaty, they gave us to Lithuania. And that was in 1939. Now, we're no longer Polish citizens. We're now Lithuanian citizens. They returned my city as the capital of Lithuania. And I said, oh, good, maybe they'll be nice to us. That's how we live. The life went on, and of course, there's no end. The Germans attacked Poland in 1939, and it lasted only 9 days because the treaty, the non-aggression treaty between Molotov and the Germans, Von Trop, they decided that Russia is okay, the Germans will not attack. Unfortunately, the Germans attacked, but the Russians took over Eastern Europe, and so now in 1939 we become Russian citizens. That lasted just a little while, and pretty soon the Germans had attacked Russia, and we knew the end for us certainly going to be. My father was now under the Lithuanian government, was an administrator in a military hospital, and he said to my mother, the Germans are approaching, and you know, they'll kill us. And and the Russian government was saying to my father, you will be going with the hospital to Soviet. So he said, take the children, and we're being taken by the Russian government. My mother said, see, that was another problem we had. We stuck with our families. And my mother said, what about my sister and the children? What about my brother and the children? My father said, I can only take you and the children. So my mother said, then we will die together. My father went to return the truck, and we didn't know what became. I had a 16-year-old brother who was supposed to go to study in America. He had already finished the high school and the Lyceum. However, the war started. So he said to my mother again, we can't stay, they will kill us. So my mother said, we're not leaving our families. My brother escaped, and we did not know what became of him. So now there's Mama and I along in my city. The Germans entered the city, and within minutes, our neighbors, whom we were so good to, and they were good to us, decided it's time to take and kill the Jews. Exactly. Now, why did we die? Because the people in the 17 countries, believe it or not, the Germans invaded 21 countries. 4 countries said to the Germans, they're citizens, which you knew Albania was a little Muslim country, took in 500 more Jews. Then Bulgaria saved 50,000 Jews. Denmark, you have all read the story. And finally, Finland. So out of the 21 countries, 4 countries said to the Germans, we are not giving them out because they're citizens. And there was a little Greek island, not Greece. So now you know, out of the 21 countries that the Germans invaded, 4 helped us, and there were righteous people, righteous Gentiles, which means anyone who's Catholic, Protestant, and they risked their lives to save us too. Well, the 17 countries, the reason we died is their own people set up their armies to kill us. That is a story that when I am invited to speak, simple. So now you know why we died. We had done nothing wrong, but we died because of the hatred toward the Jews. Why? Why did the people know it? When I speak of 7 million Jews, not 6. Because the Ukrainians killed 1.5 million Jews before the Germans began their count. And today, guess who helps the Ukrainians? The Jews, because these children are not guilty. They didn't do it. But this is the history of our lives. No matter what we did, why? We have been said that we killed Jesus. And for 2,000 years, they've been killing us. In every country, not only did they kill us, but they also kidnapped our children. So anything that the Germans have done to us has been done for the last 2,000 years to us. I'm sorry, you're adult, so I'm telling you. I wouldn't tell it if there were children. And so the Germans come into the city. And within minutes, the people come into our houses, take what they want us, they kill us. And then we look, and there, I wished I had brought pictures. And then you will see that the Germans, with the help of the country people, began to gather the first, our elderly rabbis. They took them to a place called Ponar in Vilna, and they killed them, just like that. And the shooting goes on and on. I am sorry to upset you, but that is my life. And we look, and the people are disappearing from our street. The young men disappear, and eventually everybody else. And so they said to my mother, get this little kid, you're going to work on a farm. So they took us on a truck and went on the farm, and the soldiers, the Germans with their collaborators, whacked around hitting us with their rifles, kicking. But my mother knew it wouldn't be long before we're going to all die. She was very brave, and she knew what would happen. So at night, they told us to walk for miles to back to our houses. My mother would go through all the wooded areas, make sure that we can escape, and eventually we came home. But that didn't last. That only went on for 3 months, from June to September. September came, and all of a sudden, my mother opened the doors, and we saw this elderly neighbor of ours walking around with the Germans, and they always had collaborators in every country, kicking an old man. And so they began their walk from house to house. My mother kept saying to me that I must go to our Christian neighbors. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going with you. She said, then we will die together, and I don't want that. I said, no. So the trek began. My mother looked during the Lithuanian government, during 1939 and 41. The Lithuanians did not like the Polish people. Even they were both Catholics, because of the loss of my city. The hatred went on, the loss of my city, Vilna. Vilna was the most famous Jewish city. We had newspapers, we had the greatest library in the world, the greatest scientific museums. And so the Lithuanian government was a little nice to us because they were taking revenge on the Polish Catholics. So my father was asked by the chief of police if he could help him My father said, of course, you're my friend. And so my father put up his name on the former police chief, and so they didn't bother him. Then the priest came to my father and said, I need supplies the Lithuanian government doesn't give me. And my father said, not to worry, I'll take care of it. He did. So my mother said, you must go to these people and maybe they'll take you in. I said, no. I never do that, I'm sorry. Thanks. I never do that. Thanks. So I said to my mother, no, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going with you. And she said, maybe alone I have a chance to survive, but I don't want you to die. And one good morning, they came for my courtyard. They took out an elderly couple, took them away. We knew what would happen. Then they took my friend Nahama and her mother and sisters, and the little girl cried, and the German just bayoneted that child like he was nothing. And then they came for my aunt, Batya, and her husband, Abram, and their 3 children. My cousin fainted, and my mother said, now you must go to the people. Maybe they'll take you in, maybe not. And I said, So they came. When I think that every transfer before us went to Ponar and were killed, and yet the truck came and picked us up, threw me like a sack of potatoes into the truck, and we were taken to the ghetto. My mother never gave up hope that I would live. So wherever in the house that probably had 100 people for one room, she would always go searching for a place where to hide me. Whether it was an attic, a hole in the wall, or garbage bin, whatever, she always found a way to hide me. And so, one day, they came for the children, and my mother would change my age. If they were looking for 7-year-olds, she would say I'm 8. If they took for 6, she would say I'm 5. But she hid me the whole time. She got permission to work, and she said, put me on a scarf, we will now clean the streets. Of course, they were dead bodies of children who died of starvation. But she said, no, I can't let you do it. And so she hides me. She comes with a piece of bread which she had not eaten. And finally my mother said, what's going to happen to us? My father is gone, my brother is gone. And she said, but I want you to live, Essie. What are you going to do? I said, no, Mama. I die with you. It didn't matter as long as I was with my mother. Anyhow, this goes on, and I don't have to tell you what they did to us in the ghetto. They did such horrible things that I am a survivor, and I don't believe it. So if you don't believe me, I don't believe it either. But it goes on, the torture, the starvation, the killing, the bayoneting, the burn our children alive. How human beings, such educated people as the Germans were, to do it to us. Can you imagine? If you don't believe me, don't worry. I don't believe it either. It went on like this for 2 years. And finally my mama said they're liquidating the ghetto. It wasn't enough that they were liquidating the first ghetto, they shoved us in the second, and then they were going to kill us anyhow. And it wasn't enough that the Germans with their collaborators in my country, yet the Estonians came along to help liquidate the ghetto. They didn't have enough of our own barbarians, now the Estonians came. And my mama said, this is it. You either go, she said, or we'll just go out and stand, let them shoot us. So she had a hole made in the wall for all the life. For years, I would say to my mama, but I wasn't in the ghetto. Mama would say, it's okay. I did not want to believe it, and I'd say, no, no. Anyhow, the day came that she pushed me out and told me only to speak Polish, because the Jews spoke several languages, as you know. And she said, just speak Polish, walk in the street. I went to the house of the people my father helped, and miracles, you know, the good Lord wanted me to live. There's no other explanation. And I knocked on the door, and this gentleman was now in charge of being a janitor. So I said to them, Mama said, maybe you would hide me. But what do you do in a building where there are no children and we have registers that tells you who lives there? And so they talked about it. And again, this was a building of the Polish nobility, the Polish Christians, you know, not Polish Jews. And they said, okay, come on in. But don't say a word and be quiet like you don't exist. So they decided they would hide me in a garbage bin, in the forest, need be, in the basement, in the attic. And finally, because he was a police person, so he knew, they cut out in the back of they had an armoire and a closet in front of it. They cut the back, like a dog comes out in case the Germans came, they would hide me. This goes on for a while, and of course, being a child, I was scared, and I got all these infections. And the lady had to take me to a doctor. So we went to the doctor at night, and he said to her, my niece is from Warsaw, the family were killed in a bombing. And he wasn't fooled. You know, when you live like a hermit or something, he said, please sit down. He took care of my fingers, said, please sit down. Then he went to call the Gestapo. She grabbed my hand. We ran through the streets at night, and I lived. The things that I had endured as a child during that time wasn't as bad as my people endured in the concentration camps. But nevertheless, I knew I would die. And every day when I woke up, I know that this was my last day on earth. Another time, I was in the house, it was winter time, and there was a knock on the door, but you know, we were asleep. The lady, of blessed memories, opened up the door, and she saw Germans standing there, so she pulled up the gown and said, oh, I have to take on a bathrobe, and she shoved me under the bed. And I could see their German boots. And that is another memory that I live. And I lived. But that goes on for a while, and I lived. And one day there was a knock on the door, and it was my mother's brother, who was an accountant. His wife was the chief nurse of a Jewish children's hospital. And they had escaped the ghetto. And I said to my uncle, how did you know where I was? He said, I saw your mother at the liquidation. She said, she sent you there. She said, maybe they'd leave us. And as a child, I said, who did you tell? And he said, his best Polish Christian friends of 40 years. And I said to him, why did you do that, even as a child? He said, it's my best friend. I'm friends with him Kashuk was his name, for 40 years. And I said to him, and so he asked me for a glass of water. And he said to me, you know, child, before one dies, life is good. They took a shower, they ate. And so he sent me to the kitchen. I was followed by their police dog. And and the Germans, his friend Kashuk brought the Germans. They took out my aunt and uncle, and I don't have to tell you. The next morning, and they told the dog to drag me down the basement. And the dog dragged me down the basement, and I lived. The next morning, as I looked in the basement, my cousin Eva, Chava, had us hiding in the sewers, and she thought she had a chance. They'll get papers, they'll cross the border in the Ukraine. And my cousin was caught. So I live with that. Now I am alone. To continue on, this goes on. Eventually, there was a knock on the door. They bring me up from the basement, and there was a scarecrow sitting. I grabbed the apron of Anna, and she said, "Esia, it's your mother." I did not recognize her. They knocked. She was taken after the ghetto liquidation. She was taken to the to a farm that we had worked before, and they had fun. The Germans with their collaborators, they would try shooting, telling the Jews to run. They burned them. They did everything that one could assume. It's what's going on to my people now, killing babies, burying people alive. Anyhow, I said to my mama, "Mama, what happened to you?" When she left, she looked like a 16-year-old girl. She said, "They used to shoot us, practice shooting, and they would hit us, and they knocked out her teeth, and they had a poisonous snake make her left." There were still 2 Jewish doctors left in the camp, so they fixed my mother's leg, put the dirt on it. She lived, and then they put them, now the work was done, they put in the barn to kill them. But, you know, good Lord wants you to live. So a man who owned factories came to the camp and said he needed workers. My mother was still alive, so they pulled him out. My mother said, "That's it. If my child is dead, I don't want to live." So anyhow, now it's my mother with me. Now again, I don't care dying. Anyhow, they were wonderful for the last half year. They hid us, they took care of us, and then liberation came. When I left, Mama and I left our hiding place, we were 100,000 Jews in my city alone. And 200 of us survived in the ghettos, in the forests, in the partisans, and in the Soviet Union and camps. But now we're free. And isn't that wonderful? Instead, 2,400 of us people were killed by the people of the country. 500 of us were killed. Anyhow, Mama and I did not want to go back to their house for fear we would hurt these wonderful people who risked their lives to fight to hide Jews. So Mama and I, they said to my mama when she went to our house, "If you come here, we will kill you." So Mama and I stayed for a while in the, honest to goodness, in the yard, because we had no place to go. And we stayed for a while, and then the partisans came in, and Jewish soldiers in the Russian army and Polish army had come back, and Mama and I had survived. But Mama said to me, and I will not keep you any longer, "You are going to school. This is a Jewish thing. You have to be educated." So I said to Mama, "I'm not going, I'm scared." Mama said, "You will." So we went to the school, and she said to this headmistress, "I want to enroll my daughter." And the lady said, "Okay, see, my last name and my first name spells Baronessa. My real name, I graduated high school, in case you know, under a false name. So my name, so she said, "What's her name?" And my mother said, "Baronessa." Oh, she asked my mother to please sit down, and she was so sweet. And she told my mother, "Please sit down." And she thinks I'm a baroness. Honestly, that's a true story. So she said to my mother, "I want her papers." My mother said, "We're Jews, we have nothing. We came out with the clothes on our backs." And the lady said to my mother, "Why don't you take her to a Polish school?" But you could not offend my mother. My mother walked over to her and said, Where you killed 80,000 Jews in Ponar and 102 Russian prisoners of war? Is that where you want me to take? Well, make a long story short, they enrolled me. And the wonderful people I were hiding, they always taught me something to make sure if I survived, I should know something. So my mama and I, we went to the first assembly. And on my right was my neighbor who knew me since we were little children. On the left was a girl who didn't know us. And a little girl went up to play the piano. And this lady on my left says, "Too bad we didn't kill her. She's a Jew." I didn't know there were any Jewish children left. So anyhow, when I saw this, she and I walked out. Her father was a doctor in my city. He's lost his wife and all his children except this little girl. We were taken out of that school, the two of us. By that time, the Russians had established schools for the Russians. So we went to school, and one day, walking with my Russian friend now, because we spoke Russian, we spoke Polish, we spoke Yiddish, we German, I looked in number 17, which my synagogue was number 20, which they destroyed, and a young soldier was standing there, a Russian officer, and I said to her, "Gee, what a nice young man." And she said, "Be quiet, Essie, he'll hear you." And he turned around and said, "Essie, you're my sister?" It was my brother. He was going through the city on the way to Lithuania. And he wasn't going to look for us in 51 because he knew we were dead. But he had survived. And so now, there were three of us. And my brother said, "We must now leave this land that is drenched with Jewish blood." So we made our escape from the Soviets. Not enough Germans, now we had the communists. And we made our escape through, we told them we were Polish citizens. We didn't want to live now in Lithuania. So we went through, my brother led transports out of Russia, and we escaped to Czechoslovakia, Austria. There was a country, we were there. We escaped, and we lived and came to this great land who gave us freedom for the first time, and we're grateful to all of you Americans, and especially the Americans who joined the Russians and the English to defeat the Germans. And so we lived our life, and you people have given us life. And if it weren't for the righteous Gentiles, and if it weren't for the American army, we would all been dead. So we thank you, and for those who served, God bless you. And thank you for listening to me, and may God bless you with all the blessings, and may all your wishes come true.
Would you be willing to take a few questions?
Yeah,
Okay,
of
I'll
course.
leave this for you.
If anyone has any questions, you can ask us.
I'll come down. Oops. One sec. I'll come down with the mic, and you can ask your question.
I hope I did not offend anyone. I hope I did not hurt you, but the truth has to be said. And there's another gentleman that looks very familiar to me.
I just wanted to know how old you were when this whole thing started with
9.
you. You were 9? Okay. And your mom?
Correct. I was 9 years old.
And your mom made it to the United States also and lived happy life?
I remember every minute of the day.
Okay.
I remember. I live with it all the time. I have never left. It never left me. We say that we don't live in the Holocaust, but the Holocaust lives in us all the time.
Somebody else with a question? I know that I was wondering how it was for you to acclimate when you did come to Meriden,
Pardon me?
when you had to come to Meriden and acclimate to the school.
Oh, my story is great. I came to Meriden High School, and of course I spoke not a word of English, and you wonderful teachers from Meriden, from John Barry know it. And so it was so strange. But there was a teacher, Miss, who asked a young student if he knew where I lived. And this young man said, yes, he lives right. So she said, could you walk her? After all, you come to a strange land, you speak a strange language. And so when we crossed the street, he would grab me by my sleeve and drag me because he couldn't talk to me. I couldn't talk to him. And yeah, he walked me for 3 months. And he never stopped looking after me. The very last picnic that we had, it was cold. And he took off his jacket and came put it around my shoulders. And there was one family, the Bashinsky family, who were kind. We didn't speak Yiddish. They drove me to school. And so kindness, I never forgot their kindness. And so that is what I learned in America, that you people are kind.
just wondered, how old were you when you left? It started when you were 9?
14 years old when we left our home. Yes. We left with nothing. We had to escape, and so we escaped with nothing. But the good Lord says, that's okay. That's, nothing means a thing because it's replaceable. I always tell, by the way, I have, thank God, wonderful kids, grandchildren. And I tell them, you can destroy anything you want as long as you don't get hurt. Because those things are replaceable, and they don't mean a thing to me.
And I also wanted to ask, how did you people go hide in the woods? How could you get there without being caught? Or you just went out at night? Or?
When we go out,
When you were going to hide in the woods, like what exactly logistically did you have to do? Was it at night? Were you undercover?
it was, they dug a hole and then covered it with straw, and that's where I would hide if he knew. See, he was in the police, but he was a righteous person, and he refused to join them. So he became the manager of the building, and they watched over me, and they risked their lives. If they were caught, they would have been killed. So, you know, there are 2 families in Poland. There was a monument to them, Polish Christians, who hid 2 Jewish families, and their neighbors betrayed them, so the Germans killed all 4 families. But there were decent people who gave their lives.
It's kind of an odd question, but living as you did, was there ever a point that you stopped wondering about your mother or your father? Was there a point where you knew they were gone, or did you always hope they would come back?
We always knew that we would not survive. There was no question, and there was no use thinking of them because we knew they were dead, if that's what you're asking.
So you never expected them to survive anyway?
Never thought, not in the wildest dreams that we would live. Not a question. I would get up in the morning and say, I wonder when I'm going to die. I always live with that. I wonder when I'm going to die, because there was no hope. And yet I came to that school in Meriden, and I went to John Barry School, and they were so kind to me. But I never told my story because I felt, why should we burden decent people with such pain? We live with such pain that you can't imagine. And there is not a minute, if I see somebody laughing, I say, why are they so happy? And I went out with people here in Meriden, and I just, the first New Year, I was invited, and I watched them laugh and dance and all that. I said, I just soon go home. I couldn't handle it. But you people are Americans, you don't understand it. I don't believe it, why should you? And I just say that there are decent people in the world, but there are such evil people who could bear. I watched them bury babies alive. Can you imagine? It was nothing to them. They meant nothing, just as what we just went through this time. Same thing. For us Jews, it doesn't seem to end. As I told you, we give the world everything. When I go and they have the little trains, you know, the Lionel trains, the Jewish man who developed that, and I said, why did he give it to them? What for? They're going to kill us. I mean, I live with that thought. Can't erase it. Never change. Who survived? You know, the great miracle in my city, there were only 2 families who survived, and one of them was mine. My father came back from Russia, my brother came back from Russia. Mama and I survived in the ghetto and in the camp and in hiding, and we were only 2 families. So we did survive, and That's why I said we're grateful to you, the American. My husband was born in Meriden, was a veteran in Meriden, and I always used to say to you, you know, Ed, you don't know it, but you saved me. Yeah, if the American army had not helped us, the Germans would have invaded Russia without any questions. There is no question that we would have died. And if we did not, and another thing that I hope that I won't upset anybody, it's the Jewish people who developed the atomic bomb, and if it weren't for that, the Germans would have had the atomic bomb, and it would have been an end not only to us, but everyone.
We have another question.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry if you had already covered this, but I was just curious as to how or what brought you to Meriden, how you came to be here.
Hold on.
How you came to Meriden specifically from Europe. You had told me down on Bradley Avenue you had family, right?
Yes, I came here. My family were the Shoek family and the Schwartz family. They've been here for 200 years. And the Mag family, they were very prominent people in this community. One of my great uncles, and when I go to the Meriden Cemetery, believe it or not, I am named after a great-great-grandmother who I'm named after, and she's buried in the Meriden Cemetery. And one of them was the head of the Board of Education, another one was an attorney when they came to America. So I had a big family here, yes.
Thank you. Oh, that was her question too. And what I'm curious about is when you did get your teaching degree and you taught for so many years right here in Meriden. So how did it feel to be teaching in the city where you had come as a young girl?
I'm sorry, you have to come back. I have water in my ear. I went on a trip to my granddaughter's wedding, and I have not been able to hear. They tell me I have so much water in my ears.
I'm just wondering if you wanted to elaborate on teaching in Meriden when you had come here and then graduated, you come here as a young girl, then getting your degree and deciding to teach in Meriden after.
Well, Meriden was my home. You see, we had no home. So when we came here, Meriden was our home, and we went to school here, and we had so many decent people. The Zillers are here. We weren't used to it. We had, like I said, the first time I was invited to New Year's party, they were veterans that I could associate with, but I watched them being silly. You know, they survived. And I couldn't take it. I said, take me home. It was nothing that I could handle, that much happiness. All I was used to was to tragedy.
Yeah, that's a hard transition to make, I guess, from so much tragedy.
But I just wonder, how is it for you watching the news today?
How did I come here to the room?
It's hard to watch the news today with everything happening. Hard to watch the news today with everything happening in Israel. Yeah.
Our tragedies never end. I was trying to explain to you that our people gave the Arabs, even though they were thrown out of all the land, they gave them all the aid the same as they do to Jewish people. And they don't want to go. They had a survey, and the Arabs don't want to go to Arab lands because the women are not respected like the Jewish women. And it doesn't matter. That's what I mean. When we read at our Passover time the story of our life, it tells in every generation a person will rise and hurt us. And so we are expected tragedy. I really believe it. Otherwise, how could this all happen to us? It does. And yet, like I told you, I can't help it. I am very proud of my decent. I know there are Jewish people that I have nothing to do with that. My philosophy is not theirs. I think that we do good work. We're not all perfect by any means, but we try, and we don't do what they have been doing to us forever. We try to defend ourselves, then we are accused of being evil. But it doesn't matter, because in the end, the good Lord will pay them back. I once asked a friend, a priest, I was speaking, and I said to him, how could they do that? I said, and you can give them all the absolution you want, but I said they'll rot forever, because the good Lord will not allow them when you do things like that, because adults also have a right to live, but when you do to babies who don't know why would the good Lord forgive them? I am a religious Jew, and I believe that what God says is correct. I may not always agree with everything, but I knew the good Lord had let me live, and I wish He had lived more of my people. We're less today than we were in biblical times, because they keep killing us all the time. And so you can make a difference, every one of you. You have to teach your children how to respect people. You have to teach your children to appreciate the goodness of this country. When I see children going attacking this country, I get very angry, because they should try our life. They'll see how they like it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to me.
Absolutely. I would like, if it's all right, we are going to have someone, Frank is going to give us a little information. But just at this moment, if everyone wouldn't mind standing just for a moment in appreciation of Esia being here and telling us her story. I really appreciate it. We'll just be silent for a moment.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Esia. Thank you to her son, Carrie. Thank you for Connecticut Voices of Hope for helping to put this together, to Fred and Risa, to my co-worker, Scott, our director, Becky Starr, everyone who put these things into motion and made today possible. And I'm going to hand the microphone over to Frank from the Friends of the Meriden Library. And he also is instrumental in helping us get programming and the payment for programming here.
Thank you, Doreen.